Wounded by bandits, the prince collapsed into the arms of a young woman, and that encounter changed. Before we begin this beautiful period romance story, tell me in the comments where you're listening from. I love knowing where you're joining me from. Mist lay along the road like cloth unrolled for a procession that never came. The air held the cold breath of the mountain. Inés Duarte walked with her basket curled against her hip, the glass of a stoppered jar clinking softly against a tin of balm. She had been called to a cottage at the edge of the village to ease a child's cough. She had left a bundle of dried thyme with the mother and taught her the way to boil it without bitterness. Now her steps turned homeward, and the world narrowed to the crunch of frost and the lamp she had borrowed to light each footfall. The night did not frighten her. She knew the road, the hedges, the stoop-backed wall that meant the path to the apothecary's gate was near. Yet there was a sound she did not know. Not a cry, not a laugh. Something like the last drop from a jug, then silence, then the soft, wrong movement of something yielding where it should resist. She stopped. The lamp showed the ditch as a deeper shade of dark. She lifted it, and its glow slid along wet grass, damp earth, and a shape. A man lay where the road dipped. He was on his side, his coat pressed to the ground as if he meant to listen to the roots. His breath made a small plume. His hair was dark against the pale smear of cheek. For a blink, she thought he might be asleep, a traveller who misjudged his strength and the pull of cold. Then her gaze caught the small steady seep of red along his shoulder and the edge of his sleeve. She set the basket down, kneeling. Her skirts drank the damp. She said softly, so as not to wake everything around them, "Sir, can you hear me?" His eyelids fluttered but did not open. His mouth formed a word that did not rise to sound. His hand twitched once, then stayed. No more time for questions. She pressed her palm to his neck and found a pulse, thin but loyal. Relief moved through her. The wound was not gushing. It was a cut or a tear, not a torrent. Injury could come from many things in the dark. Falling, a snag on broken wood, a rush of bodies in a road made narrow by fog. She did not need the cause to know her duty. Her father's barn lay just beyond the shop. There, with hay and oil and water, she could work. Here, under the open sky, her hands were more clumsy than clever. She leaned close and lifted his arm over her shoulder. He was taller than she and heavier, but his weight did not fight her. It yielded, as if trusting her to choose the way. She hooked her hand under his belt, braced her feet and rose. They moved together, one step at a time, the lamp in her free hand, describing small circles on the air. The mist seemed to press close, as if to help keep warmth near his skin. She spoke to him in little fragments to keep herself steady. "We have a place," she said, "not far. You will lie down in a clean room. There is heat. You must not sleep yet." At the gate, she set the basket on the ledge, lifted the latch and shouldered it open with a soft grunt. The yard was quiet. Her father's lamp had been out when she left, and a single candle would still be burning by his bed to keep watch with his prayers. The barn door stood as it always did, held by a loop of rope that yielded to a twist. She pushed through, and the smell of straw and old wood held her like familiar hands. She made a bed on the work table with a folded cloak and a stack of rough linens. She eased him onto it. He let out a thin sound, and his eyes opened. They were clear, even in the fog of weakness. They took in the lamp, the rafters. Her face bent over his and did not flinch. "Please," he said. His voice belonged to a man who had spent more hours listening than shouting. He tried to sit. She pushed gently at his shoulder. "You are safe," she said. Small words, firm voice. "Save your strength for breathing. I will see to your shoulder." He watched her as she lit a second lamp and set water by the brazier. He watched her fingers pour and measure and lay out cloths. His gaze had the weight of courtesy in it, even now, as if he was a guest at a table and meant to be grateful for whatever was set before him. When a chill shiver passed through him, he hid it like a bad habit. She warmed the balm between her fingers until it shone. "Had there been a fall?" she asked, as she helped him out of his coat, cautious not to tug anything that might cling. "Did you strike a post, a branch?" He opened and closed his mouth, as if choosing a simpler word from many. "The road was crowded," he said. "There was confusion. I am sorry for the trouble." "Hush," she said. "There is no trouble in simple care. You will speak if it eases you. If it tires you, you will leave it." He nodded. He held to the edge of the table to keep from floating away. He had the hands of a man who had written more than he had lifted, nails trimmed, knuckles smooth. As she folded the coat back, the lining pulled oddly. A seam had caught at the edge where the cloth was worn. She tucked that observation away. The wound lay along his shoulder. It was not deep, but it had opened with movement and wets the cloth again and again. She breathed once to steady, to make her hands remember what they had done many times. She washed away the thin smear of blood. Not a dramatic spill, just the steady insistence of a body that wished to find its balance again. She laid arnica along the bruised skin where the blow had struck, wherever the blow had come from. He did not ask what she was using. He kept his gaze on a knot in the beam, as if to give her privacy while she worked. "You speak like a man from the city," she said, unable to keep curiosity from threading into care. "Coimbra, perhaps. Or farther. The way you make room around a word." There was the ghost of a smile. "I have been taught to tread lightly in conversation," he said. "It keeps tempers cool and dinners long." "Dinners long," she said, and shook her head as she reached for the needle and the clean thread. The talk of courts and tables made the barn feel even smaller. "Sit very still. I must close what should not be open. If you faint, do it quietly. My father wakes at the slightest lie and no noise at all. Then I shall speak the truth," he said. "It will hurt less." She looked up at him then, surprised into a laugh that did them both good. He sat straighter. She bent closer. Her breath counted the stitches. Her hand pressed a clean cloth where needful. He did not flinch. He made a soft sound once, swallowed it, and returned his gaze to the beam. He spoke now and then in the pauses between pain. He asked what plants she preferred for different aches, and she named them, and his eyes warmed as if he truly cared. He told her there was a chapel on the path beyond the wall that had a kindness to it, and she agreed it did. Not all stone was cold, after all. When the last stitch lay in place and she smoothed the salve, her fingers brushed the inside of his sleeve to bring it back around his arm. The cloth caught. There was a slight weight where no seam should hold one. She tugged gently, thinking of a bit of straw or a button. Something small came loose and fell against the table with a small tapping sound. The lamp flame made it a star for a heartbeat. She froze. Breath pooled in her throat. It was a ring. Heavy. Plain, save for a crest carved into its face. She knew that crest, not from finery but from the seals on letters that had come to the magistrate's office, from a notice once posted in the square on a day of great news, from a stamped wax that had hung from the ribbon of a charter her father kept framed above the ledger. She had never touched it. Now it lay within reach, as if the barn were a room in a palace, and she a lady who could take such things up. His eyes had closed. Weariness had taken him down the last small step. She moved with caution, as if the air itself might be listening. She covered the ring with the edge of her apron and slipped it into her pocket, where scissors and a thimble usually kept company. Her heart beat against it, as if to test its metal. She was not a thief. She reasoned this to herself with care. A ring like that was a key. In the wrong hand, it opened wrong doors. In the right hand, it affirmed a truth. For now, the right hand was the one that would keep him breathing. She bound his shoulder and wrapped his arm across his chest to keep him from too much movement. She tucked a folded cloth at his neck to draw off any damp and set a warm brick near his feet. She poured a tisane and cooled it with a breath, then held it to his lips. His eyes opened. He drank because she asked him to. He looked at her in a way that might have been gratitude or dignity worn thin or both. She smiled without showing her teeth, a way that did not make promises too large for a small room. "What may I call you, sir, so I do not shout the wrong name should you drift too far away?" she asked. "Call me Rui," he said, after the smallest pause. "Rui is an easy name to carry." "And you are?" "Inez," she said. "It means she who is chaste in stories, though I am only a girl who counts jars and stitches and remembers names when it matters." "Names matter most when they are spoken softly," he said. He sank a little into the folded cloak as if it knew him. "Your hands are sure. You must have done this many times." "Many times and never like this," she said, then wished to take the words back for fear they were too grand. She stood and moved as if she had something precise to fetch. It gave both of them a breath. The barn door fit poorly. It had a habit of letting in the least of the wind. Tonight, it seemed to breathe. She went to it and pushed the latch into its notch more firmly. Her father's sleeping room was behind a wall of the shop, not the barn. She would not wake him unless there was no other answer. He had taught her this. He had not kept skills from her, and she would use them now. From beyond the wall came the softest roll of voices. The village did not sleep entirely. Men rose early to see to animals and to ready wagons for merchants. There had been talk at the bakehouse that officials might pass through seeking news of people of consequence traveling the post road. Some sort of official matter had sent attention along the valley like a flock of birds crossing from field to field. All that made the air feel thinner now, as if it might crack if she breathed too hard. "You will take broth if I can warm it without too much sound," she said. He nodded. His gaze slid to the apron pocket as if sensing the weight there or the space it left. "Rest," she said. "We will speak of names when your color is better. For now, you are a soul with a body that needs mending. That is all we require to be in the same room." He closed his eyes again, not in dismissal but in trust. She set the brick closer. She went to the back shelf, took a small pot, and poured the broth she had left cooling. She set it on the brazier where the coals glowed like a handful of old cherries. She kept her movements compact and ordinary, as if normality could be made like a salve and spread thin over a night that was not ordinary at all. She listened. The voices in the lane rose and fell, not angry, not loud. The sound of shoes instead of boots. A cadence that belonged to men used to being obeyed in calm. She thought of the ring in her pocket. She thought of the way Rui had spoken about confusion rather than force. She thought of the extra seam in his coat, the way it had pulled, the way the lining had been thickened as if to shelter something more tender than cloth. She had not looked, because to look would have been to see, and to see would have been to know, and knowledge was a thing that could not be put back on the shelf once it was taken down. The broth began to quiver. She turned, poured it into a bowl and carried it to the table. He took 3 sips and set it aside with thanks. His lashes were long, as children's often are, but there was nothing childish in his face. It was a face made for being listened to. That made her wary and willing at the same time. She busied herself with the basket, sorted the little jars, put the tin back where it belonged. There was comfort in the order of it. He said, "You are not afraid." She looked at him, puzzled. "I am careful. That is a cousin to fear. But fear wastes time, and time is all I have on my side when blood wishes to leave its proper place." He looked at the rafters, then back at her. "My compliments," he said, solemn as if at a dinner, however thin the table. "To your father, for teaching you in a way that does him credit, and to you for taking what was given and making it useful." She nodded, because praise that named the true shape of a thing did not need sweetening. She adjusted the lamp so the light did not fall directly into his eyes. She checked the bandage again. The wound had quieted, his breath had steadied. Color had gathered at his mouth like a decision. She moved to hang his coat to dry where the heat would not warp it. The odd seam drew her attention again. Between one breath and the next, she took the small scissors from her pocket and nipped the place where the thread had been pulled by some rough tug. The lining lifted a finger width. She did not reach in. She ran her fingers along the edge. There was a sound like paper rubbing against paper. She set the coat down as if it had grown warm. The ring in her pocket pressed against her thigh. She put the scissors away. Later, when he slept more deeply, when she could ask without making him choose between danger and trust. The thought of making him choose at all made her chest tighten, as if a belt had been drawn an extra hole. She would not do that to anyone if she could help it, and least of all to a guest who had bled on her table and thanked her for it, as if she had done him honor. The voices in the lane came closer. The measured tone of a man who had practiced being heard while others wished to speak over him. The cadence of someone used to doors opening. The magistrate. He had gone home long after the candles in his office had burned low. He had eaten a late meal. He had washed his hands. Now he was out before dawn, because duty made short work of comfort for men like him. He was not a bad man. He was a man who loved order. Order did not always love those who deserved it. Ines wiped her hands on a clean cloth. She went to the shop door where the bell hung. She lifted the latch. Cold air came in like a mouth opened. The lane held more lanterns than usual. The magistrate stood with 2 men from the council, and a clerk whose pen never left his fingers, even when he was not writing. Behind them, the baker's boy stared around a stack of baskets, eyes wide. The magistrate's hair was neat. He had taken care with his appearance, as if wearing respect might win him more of it. "Senor Magistrate," she said, dipping a small curtsy she hoped would satisfy the shape of the morning. "How early you are. Is there need?" He inclined his head, as if to show that need did not stand on ceremony. "Good morning, Miss Duarte. We are checking upon a matter of some delicacy. Travelers have been delayed. The road was crowded, I am told. Confusion sometimes leads to accidents. We are asking each household to confirm that there are no strangers in distress. It is for the safety of all." She knew that what he said was half truth and half the kind of blanket that covers more than it warms. She lifted her chin the slightest degree. "We did have a caller at the cottage of Juan Cardoso, a child with a cough. He is known to you, of course. I left only just now and returned to find my father asleep and the yard peaceful." He peered over her shoulder into the dim of the shop. "I should like to see the rooms," he said. "A matter of routine. We would not wish anyone to suffer for lack of attention. You are known for your careful work. We will not disturb your father if he sleeps." She held her breath for a count of 3. Then she smiled with the slight lift of one corner of the mouth that her mother had taught her used to disarm the curious without angering them. "Of course, Senor Magistrate. We keep no secrets from those who keep our laws." He stepped across the threshold, mindful of the bell, which chimed once as if to mark a new hour. The clerk followed, the pen already poised to set words on paper, as if words could make a morning solid. The councilman came behind, more interested in the warmth of the room than in duty. She led them through the shop with its neat rows of jars, each labelled in her father's hand. She opened the door to her father's small room so they could see his sleeping shape, the candle steady in its cup. The magistrate nodded, satisfied, perhaps even a little relieved, to find normal life in a night he had not expected to spend at doors. "And the barn," he said lightly, as if it were an afterthought. "You use it for storage, do you not?" "We do," she said. "There is hay, tools, the sort of clutter a working place accumulates. I tell my father it makes for poor habit, but he is true to old ways." He smiled, the way men smile when reminded of their fathers. He gestured. "If you would be so good." She felt the ring in her pocket again, how it made her waist feel as if a hand pressed there. She could not let him walk into a room where a man lay mending who had given a name that might not be the name the magistrate expected. She did not wish to lie. She did not wish to have the truth to hand and not offer it. And yet she thought of Rui's face when courage found its place there. She thought of how paper can be made to say many things when too few eyes guard it. She lifted her head. The truth she could tell was this: there was someone in her care. He was safe. He was not to be paraded. He was a person before he was a problem. "There is a guest," she said. "A cousin. He stopped here to warm himself. He took a fall on the road in the dark. He is resting. I would not show him in his present state to anyone. A man deserves to wake with his dignity. You may come back at sunrise. He will be sitting then, and better able to nod to your good offices." The magistrate's brows rose, not in anger, but at the proximity to a boundary he had not been the one to draw. "A cousin," he said, tasting the word as if it might have a hidden pit. "From where?" "From Coimbra," she said, because the name had already been set on their lips by talk of the university and of officials, and because Coimbra was far enough to be important and near enough to be plausible. He considered. He looked at the pen in the clerk's hand, as if to ask whether ink and paper had an opinion. The clerk shrugged a little, because ink is bold when set to vellum, but timid when asked to lead the way in a barn. The magistrate nodded. "We will return," he said. "But you understand, Miss Duarte, that harbouring persons unknown, even cousins, during unsettled hours may bring questions. Questions beg answers. Answers sometimes carry weight. It is a heavy thing to promise in the dark." "I will stand under what I promise in the light," she said, "and my father with me." He inclined his head again, a mark of respect to both old man and young woman. He turned to go. The councilman stepped aside to let him pass. The clerk wrote something without looking. The pen scratched like a dry leaf. The bell chimed once more as the door closed behind them. She leaned against the counter, felt her spine, counted her bones, the way she did when she was very young and afraid of storms. She turned back through the shop, past the door that led to the yard, past the barrels where rainwater sat patient. She pushed open the barn door, its rope loop catching at her sleeve, as if to hold her for a breath. Rui had not moved. The bandage held. His chest rose and fell. The shape of him was at ease. She set the bowl of broth on a table by his elbow and sat at the edge of a milking stool so that her body blocked the crack in the door through which a thin blade of light fell and fell again as the wind toyed with the latch. The world grew very simple. It was a barn, a man, a girl, a ring, and the morning somewhere not far away waiting to be invited. She could almost hear her mother's voice, dry and dear, reminding her that the simplest things are hardest to keep clear. She rose and checked the latch again, pressed it down until the wood accepted it with a soft click that was less a sound than a decision. Outside, the hush broke and reformed, a wave that did not decide whether to crest or fall. In the lane, a command found its tone. The lamps moved together. The apothecary door loomed larger than it was, every board a witness, every hinge a judge. Inez smoothed her apron, felt the shape of the ring, and lifted her chin not too high but high enough to teach her throat where courage lived. Knuckles struck the apothecary door, measured and insistent, and a magistrate's voice carried through the wood. "Surrender the stranger at once." The words hung between wood and air. Inez did not move at once. The sound carried like cold water seeping under a door, patient and certain. She rose from the milking stool and set her palm on the barn latch, not to open it but to feel how firm it held. Rui slept a thin sleep. His breath skimmed the border between waking and rest. The ring in her apron pocket made its small, steady weight known. She went through the yard, past the rain barrel, past the herbs tied in little sheaves to dry. The apothecary door had 2 bolts. She lifted the top one and left the lower set. A second knock came, and this time it held less ceremony. She answered before a third could teach the wood to bruise. "I hear you, Senor Magistrate," she said, steady. "A moment, if you please." The jar of lavender carded off its shelf in her hand, as if it wanted to be part of a normal morning. She set it down again. She opened the door enough to show respect without giving away the whole room. He stood with the clerk and a different pair of attendants from before. Their faces were new. Their mouths had learned to keep secrets with ease. The magistrate's gaze went to the floor, then to her face. His voice was polite. "Miss Duarte, we require the truth. We call for the stranger under your roof. It is not a request made lightly. These are not hours to test goodwill." Her mouth answered before her pulse could bargain for silence. "He is my cousin," she said, choosing the word already set in their last exchange. "He came from Coimbra and misstepped on the road. He is under care. You will not find him fit to be displayed to anyone. I will not be the one to drag him into the cold. If you must see him, you will do it when light respects a face, not before." The clerk's pen scratched a question mark she could almost hear. The magistrate held up a palm. He weighed options like coins. Then he nodded once, as if awarding her a point in a game he had not agreed to play. "Your cousin," he repeated. "Name him." "Rui," she said. "Rui Duarte." She let the surname be a shield, though it warmed her cheeks to use it so. He considered the shape of it. The clerk wrote the name with neat strokes and waited for more. The magistrate asked, "How long will he be in need?" "Until he wakes without wincing when he breathes," she said. "Until he can hold broth and walk without a hand under his elbow. Until his dignity is safe." He stared at her in a way that said he saw a child and a woman at once. He accepted that both could be true. He glanced at the attendants. They looked at their hands and adjusted their shawls. He sighed, not with defeat, but with duty remeasured. "Sunrise, then," he said. "We will return as the bells mark it. You will present him at the shop threshold. You will vouch for his good conduct." He gave her a fraction of a smile, an allowance wrapped in a warning. "If we find that your cousin is no such thing, the conversation grows heavier for everyone who bears your name." She did not flinch. "I understand the weight of names," she said. "I keep ours as I must." She lifted her chin a little. "And, Senor Magistrate, I have a request in return. When you speak of this visit, do it softly. Words carry more than feet do at this hour." He inclined his head, a courtesy offered because he could. He turned away. Lanterns drifted. The bell above the door gave a small apology as she closed it. She let out the breath she had saved. She went back through the shop and into the yard. The barn held the same scent, the same dim. Rui had not woken. She looked at the bandage and saw no new bloom. She placed her fingers along his wrist and felt steady rhythm. It steadied her in turn. She set to work. She cleaned the bowl and set water to warm. She folded the cloths she had used, not to hide them, but to order them. Then she went to his coat. Curiosity is a living thing. It will not be left in a corner with a scolding. She held the coat as she would a person. She found the odd seam again and traced it. She remembered that first faint sound of paper when she had tested it earlier. She took up the small scissors, slid a blade beneath a loose thread and nicked it free. The lining parted enough for a hand. She did not thrust fingers in. She laid the coat flat, breathed once, then twice, and eased a strip of paper into sight. It was not long. It was folded with care that had become habit. The edge of a seal clung to it. The wax split not by force that startled, but by handling that persisted. The imprint was faint. Enough remained to show the same crest in miniature as the ring in her pocket. Her hands should have shaken. They did not much. She unfolded the paper as if it might feel pain if hurried. Names lay there in even script. A flow of supplies, a list of approvals, little notations in margins that sounded like a voice clearing its throat before speaking in public. She read as if eavesdropping at a door. She saw dates. She saw a word she knew too well. Apothecary. She traced it to find which town sat beside it. Her eyes met her own roof. She leaned back as if pushed. Her father's name was not written. His shop was. She recognized the way his purchases might have been counted to give shape to other men's plans. She closed the paper and held it to her breast for a moment, not to claim it or claim him, but to steady herself. She did not wish to understand more than she must. Understanding comes with a price. She placed the paper in the fold of her bodice where the cloth would guard it from falling. It lay there like a truth that would not be misplaced. Rui stirred. His eyes opened slowly. The little light in them returned reluctantly, then settled. He saw her face and watched it as one reads a map. "There is worry," he said, not asking but naming. "There is work," she said. "Worry only makes poor light. Drink a little." She lifted the bowl to his lips again. He took a careful sip, then another. "I heard voices," he said. "You did," she answered. "The magistrate is a man who likes the sound of order. He will return with the sun. You must remain what you are for now. A cousin who took a fall. A traveler who smells of road and not of rumor." He smiled at that, a small acknowledgement of a shared joke. Then he moved to rise, slow and stubborn, as men do when kindness makes them unsteady. "I should go," he said. "I should leave before more kindness is demanded of you. It is not fair to weigh your name with mine." She put a hand to his shoulder. It was not pressure, it was sense. "You will go nowhere until your breath does not pull at your stitches," she said. "Pride is not a poultice. It cures nothing. If you wish to help me, give me an hour without worry." He looked toward the door, toward the place where voices had been. He set one foot to the ground. He tried to rise. The room shifted for him. His hand went to the table's edge. His face did not betray pain, but it admitted weariness. He stood for the length of one measured breath, as if to prove a point to no one in particular, and then his knees softened. He settled back with a care that looked like grace. "I yield to the wisdom of your house," he said with a rueful half-smile. "You see why dinners in my world are long. We must speak in circles until someone suggests soup. Soup is rarely wrong," she said, and allowed herself the littlest laugh. Then she sobered. "If you did leave and falter in the lane, who would find you? The baker's boy with a head full of stories. The magistrate whose pen loves numbers more than faces. No? Better to rest where your name is just a sound, not a banner." He tilted his head. "You speak as if you have seen names used as banners." "I have seen a man say a word in the square and watch shutters close," she replied. "I have seen another say a different word and watch them open. I learned that the word is not the power. It is the hand that holds it." She remembered the ring. She did not touch it. She did not need to feel it to know it was there. The barn door chose that moment to creak. It had a talent for ill-timed honesty. Beatrice slipped through, cheeks bright with the cold, a basket on her arm. She shut the door and leaned against it, as if it had tried to push her back into the lane. Her eyes flicked to the table, to the man on it, to Inez's face. Her breath came quick and quiet, the kind drawn in the middle of telling a secret. "Do not scold me," she said, before Inez could shape words. "I used the side path. I brought clean cloths. I took the others away in a bundle under baby shirts. If any asked, I said I was making a quilt." Inez's relief was a tide. She moved to Beatrice and pressed both hands to her friend's arms. "You are a saint, sent with a needle," she said. "And you are a wonder with a story." Beatrice gave a small grin that wobbled. "I am only a woman who likes truth better when it is folded once," she said. She sobered. "They are talking at doors." The magistrate went to the miller's and to the barber. "He is polite. He is thorough. He asks for news of travellers. Someone said the coach at the pass did not arrive." She swallowed. "Someone else said there was confusion on the road. No one says more than that out loud. But the way hands move tells the rest." Inez glanced at Rui. His gaze had grown intent without hardening. He watched Beatrice as if learning lines in a play that mattered. "This is Rui," Inez said, choosing the name again because it had become a thread she did not want to drop. "He is a cousin. He is not well enough to be interesting to anyone but me." She met Beatrice's eyes and begged with a look for the kind of loyalty they could afford. Beatrice nodded with the speed of a needle going in and out. "Cousin," she said, and smiled at him with the respect one offers a stranger who will soon be a friend. "You look as if the bed is trying to teach you patience. Be taught. It will do you good." She set the basket down. "I will take the linens," she went on, "and stop at my aunt's to speak of the price of thread. Loudly, in front of anyone who cares to turn an ear." There was the faintest ring of laughter in Rui's eyes. "We are very grateful," he said. "I shall pay you in patience if nothing else. I have an abundance. You will pay me by getting well and by letting Inez sleep sometime this week," Beatrice said. Her gaze darted again to Inez. "There is more," she said, and her voice dropped. "The magistrate asked if your father keeps careful accounts. I said he breathes by them." He did not smile. He asked what merchants come through most often. I told him the names you would have told him. He nodded. He said words like inventory and oversight and provisional. She made a face as if tasting a bitter tea. Then he said he would call again when the bells allow him respect. Inez felt the paper against her skin. It seemed to warm as her worry did. She thought of her father's ledger, the pride he took in a clean column and a page without blot. She held Beatrice's gaze. "Thank you," she whispered. Then, more briskly, because briskness keeps tears where they belong, "Take the linens. Leave by the back. If anyone asks, say you came for rosemary against winter lungs." She turned to the shelf and took bunches of the herb, wrapped them, and tucked them into the basket so the scent would tell the story before Beatrice's lips had to. Beatrice took the basket and stood very still a moment. She looked at Inez as if to say, "You are past the part where a friend can ask if you are sure." Then she nodded. "Courage," she said simply, and vanished into the grey edge of the yard. Inez turned back. Rui's gaze was on the ceiling again, but it was a courtesy to her, not a retreat. She went to his side, checked the bandage with a hand that felt each thread give safely. "You will stay," she said, because she needed to hear it aloud. "For now," he agreed. Then he added, with a tone that was half apology, "I asked you earlier what herbs you prefer for rest. I ask now what you prefer for courage." "Tasks," she said, "small ones. One after another. We will name them and do them." She looked at his coat. She thought of the paper. She thought of telling him she had found it, and of the way the truth would enter the room and rearrange the chairs. She chose another small task first. She set the kettle on to boil and poured him a fresh cup of tisane. He drank. He rested. She counted the breaths between one worry and the next. The morning swelled around them, a tide that did not care for human plans. The lane grew louder. A cart rattled by, then another. Then a runner's feet in a hurry that had more purpose than exercise. The baker's boy whistled a tune that changed time like a ribbon catches on a nail. Doors opened. Greetings were exchanged with too much cheer. It was the sound of a village keeping its balance in a wind. Inez went to the coat again. "There is no good time to be brave, so it might as well be now," her mother would have said. She took a breath and looked at Rui. "Your coat had a seam that misbehaved," she said. "In it there is a paper. I did not want to find it. I found it. I read as little as I could and too much all the same. There are names and numbers and the shape of errands that touch my father's livelihood. She waited for anger or fear to change his face. Neither did, not as much as she expected. Something like relief crossed it, quickly, and then hidden. He reached, not toward her, not toward the coat, but toward the space between them where words travel. "Thank you for telling me," he said. "You could have done many things. You did the one that keeps us both honest in a room where truth is easy to misplace." She nodded and brought the coat to him so that he could see the opening she had made. He did not scold. He did not praise as if she were a child who had guessed a riddle. He only looked at the seam and then at her and said softly, "This complicates your day, and I am sorry." "It complicates more than mine," she said, because saying less would have been a lie. He waited. She did not make him beg for the rest. "The paper lists approvals and the moving of goods. It uses our shop to point at other places. It will be used to point at us if someone wishes to keep their own name out of the conversation." She laid the truth gently, as if putting a baby down to sleep. He closed his eyes for a beat, then opened them. The quiet between them gained weight. He set his palm flat on the table. "I traveled with that paper because light cannot be made without tinder," he said. "If there is shadow, there must also be the thing that casts it. I wanted proof that could not be swept with a sleeve. I did not mean for it to touch you. I do not ask your forgiveness. I ask your patience. I ask your help." The words were not commands. They were requests wrapped in the humility of someone who had been sure of many things and now was sure of fewer, and grateful for that. A sound at the yard gate cut through his last phrase. Not a knock, not a greeting. A scrape, a hesitation, and then a laugh with no humor in it. There are men who laugh like that when they have found what they did not dare hope to find and do not yet know whether to be pleased. Inez felt her skin prick. She moved to the crack in the barn door and looked through. The lane beyond the yard was not empty. 3 figures stood near the shadows where the wall turned. She recognized one by posture, by the way he kept his boots clean without seeming to try, by the way his hands spoke even when his mouth was quiet. Captain Lobo had called in and out of the village for years. He bought eggs and bread and information with equal grace. He owed no one money because he paid with promises and with favors arranged in daylight. He had a talent for understanding where lines were and putting his shoe just near them. He stood with 2 companions who could have been cousins, or could have been the sort of men who have many cousins because family is a useful word. Lobo's gaze moved over the yard in a friendly way, as if he were a neighbor admiring paint that had not chipped. He saw the herbs tied to dry and nodded at them as if they were doing well. Then his eyes caught on something near the rain barrel, a scrap of nothing the wind had teased loose. He bent and picked it up between 2 fingers. Inez's breath caught. She knew that color, that sheen. The bit of wax from the broken seal had been no bigger than a thumbnail. She had thought it lost in the straw. The wind had thought otherwise. Lobo held it up to the morning, as if to see whether it would catch the light. He squinted and his mouth lost its smile for a heartbeat. He turned it over once, twice, learning with his fingers what his eyes already told him. He looked up. The friendly gaze had not returned. He did not call out. He did not knock. He touched his companion's sleeve with 2 fingers. Just so. The other man leaned in. Lobo's lips barely moved. He spoke a word meant only for those within reach. His tone was warmth wrapped around something cold. "It's him," he said, "the prize. He's here." Inez did not let the words take root. She moved before fear learned the room. She went to the table and put her hand on Rui's shoulder. "Wake," she whispered. "We must go by the back path. Do not argue. Save your breath for the hill." His eyes opened as if he had been waiting for this summons. He nodded and tried to sit. She steadied him with her forearm under his good elbow. He swung his feet to the floor. The floor felt unsteady to him. He breathed out through his nose like a man who had learned to master discomfort by making it smaller. She wrapped his coat around him and fastened only the top button, the rest hanging loose to leave his side free. The edge of the open seam brushed her palm. She did not look down. He glanced toward the door, then to her. "How near are they?" he asked, voice low. "Near enough to smell our past lies," she said, then softened it with a half-smile. "And near enough to see our courage if we let them. Follow me." She took the lamp and cupped its glass with her hand to tame the light. The barn held its breath as they slipped through. She eased the rope from the peg that secured the small side gate. The yard greeted them with a wash of damp air. She listened. The lane held a murmur like bees. Nothing surged. That would come later. She led him along the back wall where mint grew stubborn in the cracks, then through the narrow gap where the stone had shifted years ago and never been corrected. The garden of the neighbor's workshop lay quiet. The apple tree held its limbs like an old aunt guarding a secret. Ines moved under its boughs into the field beyond, where frost crisped the ground. Rui kept pace. He did not complain. He stumbled once on a rut, and she caught him by the sleeve and pulled him forward with a strength that surprised them both. He smiled at that, as if glad to be pulled by someone who meant what she did. She set the lamp down once to listen. Voices drifted, worried and official at once. They were counting doors. Good. That meant the lane took up attention while the hillside forgot to look. The path at the hedge's far end rose between two low walls. The stones were dark and slick. The mist leaned over like a neighbor with advice. "Here," she said, and put his hand to the top stones to guide his steps. The chapel's bell tower would be a smudge against the pale when the mist lifted. For now, the path knew their feet. They climbed without conversation for a time. Breath made small plumes. The lamp drew circles that slipped and reformed on the stones, obedient to her hand. Rui's jaw set in a line that looked like resolve rather than pride. He rested once against the wall and closed his eyes, not to sleep, but to gather the ground beneath him. She waited, one hand on the edge of his coat, the other holding the lamp low to keep its light hidden. The smell of rosemary from her pocket rose when the lamp warmed her apron. It made the world feel like a kitchen instead of a hiding place. "You know this path," he said at last, quietly. "I know every path that leads to a place where quiet keeps people whole," she said. "It is my work. It is my pleasure." He nodded and let that settle. Then he added, as if speaking to himself, "Quiet is a luxury in rooms where power sits. I did not know I missed it until tonight. You will learn to keep it in your pocket like a handkerchief," she said. "Pull it out when you need it." He gave a small laugh that did not carry. The chapel appeared out of the grey like a thought one had been trying to catch. It was small. Its stones were not impressive. Its door stuck in damp weather. That meant it resisted fools and drafts with equal fairness. Inez set the lamp on the step, pressed her shoulder to the wood, and eased it open with a little groan that sounded like an old man waking and asking whether the day was necessary. She held it wide enough for Rui to pass. He ducked his head, a habit of respect learned in rooms where low doorways were rare. Inside, the air was cooler, not cruelly, but as if to keep one alert. The single window admitted a pale wash. A saint watched from the far wall with a patience that did not judge. Inez guided Rui to a pew and lowered him gently. He let out a breath like a promise. She set the lamp on the altar rail where its glow would not spill outside. She moved to the shelf where matches and candles waited. She lit one and set it high so that the room grew warm in attitude, if not in temperature. "Remove your coat," she said. "Let me see what the hill asked of your stitches." He obeyed without the stubbornness that had tried to walk him out of the barn. She unwrapped the bandage and saw that the work had held. The climb had not taxed the wound more than a small seep that stopped even as she lifted the cloth. She wiped it clean with water she had warmed against the glass of the lamp. He shivered once and tried to still it. She told him not to be a hero. He smiled and let the shiver finish its business. "You stitched me in a barn," he said. "Now you tend me in a chapel. At this pace I shall be mended next in a palace. I prefer rooms where the floor is honest," she said. "Palaces are a tangle of rugs and manners. One can slip." He watched her hands. He let the quiet do its work between them. Then he said very gently, as if inviting her to refuse, "You found something in my coat." She did not pretend otherwise. I did. I would not have looked. The seam betrayed itself. The paper made itself known. It was not curiosity. It was obedience to what fell into my hands. "And what did it tell you?" "That men enjoy moving goods as much as they enjoy moving words," she said. "That some signatures travel faster than others. That my father's shop, which keeps honest accounts and modest stock, may be used as an innocent name on a list that means something less innocent to those who wish it so." She kept her voice flat so that panic could not use it as a ladder. His mouth hardened for a heartbeat, then eased. He did not argue that she had read too much or too little. "Your worry is warranted," he said. Your father's name must not be a bridge to other men's purposes. He looked at the ring on his finger and turned it once, then twice, as if thinking with his hands. She reached into her bodice and brought out the folded paper. She did not hand it to him yet. She held it between them like a candle one is about to pass. "This is tinder," she said, "not for burning, but for catching light. It will show faces. It will show how smoke has been made to drift where it suits certain windows. If we bring it to the wrong room, it will be called a misunderstanding, and we will be told to go home and be grateful we were corrected." He met her eyes. His had the clear look of someone who had argued with himself and lost to his relief. "Then we must find the right room," he said. "And the right moment," she added. "Timing is also a door." "You speak like someone born to my mother's council table," he said, amused and moved at once. "I speak like a woman who has watched many chiefs talk until the soup grows cold," she replied. Then she held out the paper. He took it with a care that matched hers. He did not open it. He set it on his knee and laid his palm over it for a breath, as if to bless or be blessed by it. "There is something I must tell you in exchange," he said. His voice changed by a degree she could feel more than hear. It gained honesty at the price of ease. "I traveled in secrecy tonight, not because I enjoy masks. I traveled to test a suspicion. Whispers have been collecting like damp in corners. If one knocks on the right wall, one hears the hollow places." He looked up at the saint as if to ask for the right words. "I let it be known, carefully, that a person of consequence would pass. I wanted to see who leaned forward." She stood very still. Part of her had known. The ring had told her without boasting. The paper had argued the rest. Yet hearing it from his mouth did something to the room. It aligned the benches and the window and the breath in her own lungs. She asked, and the titles were a formality one could not avoid. "Who are you when you are not Rui?" He did not flourish. He did not say it as if the ceiling should admire him for it. "I am Raphael," he answered. "Dom Raphael, if one must click heels." He looked at his hands as if they had betrayed him and then forgiven him in the same day. "I did not intend to use your kindness as a cover for my game. I intended to pass and to return by another road, carrying what I learned." The knight had other ideas. She took the name as if it were a heavy jar someone had asked her to hold. She did not drop it. She tested its weight. She looked at his face again. It was not different. It was exactly the same face that had teased her a little about courage and soup, the same mouth that had made humor when pain had an opinion. She felt both wounded and honored by the truth at once, and a little foolish for having named him cousin with such ease. Her cheeks warmed. She was grateful for the chill of the chapel, which made such warmth less obvious. "You let me lie for you," she said, not accusing, simply naming the thread that now ran through the morning. "I let you protect a life," he said, and did not put his own ahead of the truth. Then he added, smaller, "I let you bear weight you had no time to choose. For that, I am sorry." She breathed out and in and let the breath teach her what to say next. "I do not carry things very far that I am not willing to own," she said. "I will carry this if carrying it means my father's name does not lie in the road for someone else to step on. We will bring the paper to a door that does not slide shut when names like yours knock." He smiled at that, not broadly, not triumphantly, but like a man who sees a path through fog. "Thank you, Ines," he said. He used her name with the care of a person who knows the weight of names. She tied the bandage again, smoother now that the chapel light turned the cloth into a thing she could trust. Then a thought came to her, quick as a sparrow. "If you are to stand in rooms where my words may be seen as too small to hear, you must teach me to make them louder without shouting. Show me how one bows without bending the neck so far that one loses one's mind." He blinked, then laughed, then sobered in a way that made the lesson feel like a shared prayer. He set his feet on the stone, stood slowly, and waited for the wave of tiredness to pass. He held out his hand, not like a prince receiving a courtier, but like a teacher inviting a student to try a new step. "The spine should be a line," he said softly. "The eyes do not drop to the floor. They look at the person, not the carpet. The head inclines as one says yes to truth, not to flattery." He demonstrated a small bow. It was precise and human. She imitated him and felt ridiculous in the first inch, then found something like dignity in the second. She nearly toppled on the third. He caught her elbow without squeezing, and the grasp held more respect than any curtsy she had ever seen in a noble salon. "If you faint," he murmured, "do it quietly." My instructor has no patience with dramatics. She smiled. The chapel smiled with her, or so it felt. She tried again and kept her balance. He nodded. That nod felt like a blessing. They sat once more. The glow held. The world beyond the thick door rearranged itself in shadows and whispers. The village bell did not ring. Not yet. Time seemed to wait for their decision. The quiet broke like thin ice. Footsteps approached along the outer path, sure and unhurried. Not village feet, not sneaking feet. The door breathed against its hinges. Inez set her hand flat on the bench. Rui's head turned, alert but not tense. A knuckle touched wood, polite as a guest. Then a voice. Gentle, alert, low. Is there light for a traveler who has been seeking since midnight? Inez and Rui looked at each other. The voice held the tone of a man who had learned how not to be overheard. Inez rose and went to the door. Who asks? She said, not opening. A friend whose oath is tied to a name I must not shout on a hillside, came the reply. He sounded like the kind of man who did not change his pace to prove anything, even when asked to hurry. She opened the door the breadth of a hand. The mist wrapped the threshold. A man stood there in a plain cloak with the dignity of someone who had walked far without complaint. His face was ordinary in the way that helps a man pass through crowds. His eyes were not. They had the watchfulness of a hawk and the patience of a shepherd. He bowed minimally to Inez, enough to ask for entry without assuming it. He looked past her to Rui, caught the sight that mattered, and let his shoulders drop half an inch as if a weight had just found the floor. Senor, he said simply, and the word held more layers than most people use in a month. Rui did not rise again. He did not have to. He lifted his hand, and the other man came forward and knelt, not out of ceremony, but because the height difference annoyed him. You took your time, Rui said, dry and fond. The man smiled with his eyes. The pass was a tangle, he said. I found the coach where it stopped. The horses were unsettled. The men were shaken rather than hurt. They could not tell me a clear story, which is a story in itself. He glanced at Inez. He did not ask her to leave. He accepted her presence as central, not incidental. He said, I am Maya. Sergeant, if we are counting. But please call me by my name. I have spent the night speaking mine to stones so that I would not forget it. Inez nodded to him and did not try a curtsy in case her knees had forgotten how to behave. You found us, she said. He worked his jaw, thinking about how much truth to set on the table. I followed the shape of sense, he said. I asked which house has a light in its windows when others rest. I asked whose door does not close when pain knocks. Every finger turned to you. He looked at Rui again. He did not hide pride. He did not make a show of it either. I am glad to see you breathing. I am more glad to see you under the care of someone whose hands know what they are about. Rui inclined his head in a way that was more gratitude than habit. We have a matter, he said, and placed his palm flat on the folded paper without naming it. It touches names and ledgers. It will not wait until I can stand in a council chamber. Maya's gaze flicked to Inez's face, took its measure and returned without judgment. Then we will make a room that is as good as a chamber, he answered. The chapel will do. The saint will forgive us for turning it into a clerk's desk. Inez brought the lamp to the pew and set it, so it threw light where words would sit. She drew the paper closer and looked to Rui for permission. He gave it with a small nod. Maya washed his hands at the font as if to ready them for clean work. It was not superstition, it was respect. Then they bent over the document together. Names stood in their straight lines, orders and approvals stitched through them with neat strokes. Maya read with the care of a man who had learned his letters, because they allowed him to keep faith with more accuracy. He made small sounds in his throat when something pleased him or displeased him. He did not rush to conclusions. He recognized several names and did not say what he felt about them. He asked questions that brought out the next thought. Inez answered where she could and let silence answer where she could not. When they were finished reading, Rui said, Inez fears rightly for her father's good name. I fear rightly for a crown that hangs on rotten rope if we do not mend it. We need a clerk we can trust, and a magistrate who will not put this paper into the wrong hand as soon as he is afraid. Maya pursed his lips. I know one clerk in Coimbra who loves ink more than men, and thus can be trusted to honor ink properly, he said. And I know which magistrates love neatness more than truth. We will not trouble them. We will use our feet, our eyes, and our luck." He rested his hands on his knees. "But there is the matter of getting from this hill to a table where the paper will be copied without meddling. And there is the matter of who watches your door in your absence." Inez felt the words like a chill. Maya's proud line of work meant that he had already thought 3 steps ahead. He looked to her, not to command, but to consult. "What is the shape of the village this morning?" he asked. She told him about the magistrate's visit and his promise to return. She told him about Beatrice's errand and her quick tongue used for their good. She told him, lastly, about the man in the lane whose eyes read more than the words on a page. Maya knew the name before she gave it. He said it with dislike he did not bother to hide. "Lobo," he said, and the name sat badly on his tongue. "He has charm like a clean coat. He steps around puddles that other men do not notice. He will not leave a thing alone once he finds a loose thread." Rui tapped the paper. "Then we must knot the threads before he tugs," he said. "Maya, you will go ahead and ready the clerk and the room. I will follow when I can walk like a man rather than a bundle carried by friends." Maya's eyes crinkled. "You will not be carried. You will be guided," he said. "There is dignity in being wise enough to accept a hand on a steep path." He glanced at Inez. "May I be frank?" "You would not serve him well if you were otherwise," she said. He gave her a quick, respectful nod. "If you walk with him, you make a shield. That is not a wall," he said. "People will see you. They will hesitate to push. There is a superstition about harming those who carry good work in their hands. Use their superstition. Let it buy us time." She heard the little truth hiding in his advice. Her presence would both expose and protect. She accepted it because it was better than letting fear tie her up, while harm walked around her cleanly. "I will walk," she said, "but not until we tell my father where his shop stands in others' mouths. He will not forgive me for choosing without him." Maya's mouth softened. "He has raised a daughter who speaks like a partner," he said. "He deserves his share of the day." They began to plan. It was not grand. It was a list of tasks that could be done by feet and hands and words. Maya would go down the steep path that cut behind the chapel to the mule track. He would borrow a cart under pretense of needing to move sacks of flour and use it to carry a few bundles that were not flour at all. Inez would bring Rui down the gentler path through the olive grove where the stones were less treacherous. They would cut through a courtyard that belonged to a cousin of the miller who had no love for Lobo's kind of smiling. They would cross the square only once. They would move as if they belonged to the morning, not as if they were running from the night. Before they could rise to take the first small step, the chapel took a breath with them and held it. Then it gave it back in the form of a sound that did not belong to a quiet plan. A bell rang below, not the small tone of a house, not the noble peal that calls for celebration. It was the magistrate's bell, swung by a hand that meant business. 3 slow strokes. The sound climbed the hill as if carried in a bowl. It meant summons, census, attention. It meant that something had been found or was about to be claimed. Inez closed her eyes once and opened them. She listened. The second sound was softer but sharper, like a thread pulled through cloth. It was a voice carried by many mouths at once, because that is how news runs in a village without needing feet. "The apothecary," the voice said. "The apothecary." The words reached them not by magic, but by the simple arrow-straight path of worry. Maya went to the door and looked down the hill with a care that spoke of long practice. He did not curse. He did not run. He came back to them and kept his voice steady. He did not soften it to spare her. He said the name she did not want to hear and said what that name had done. "Lobo has taken your shop and holds Tomas Duarte." Maya did not waste breath on alarm. He took hold of the plan with both hands and bent it toward the new fact. "You will not rush," he said. "You will walk as if this is a day for errands. Inez, bring the paper and what you need to speak plainly. Senor, keep your coat buttoned enough to show respect and open enough to ease your side. We will go down the olive path. I will go ahead to the magistrate and request that all parties be brought into one room. He will like that. He likes rooms where he can see every chair." Shanace's mind leaped to her father as a flame leaps to twig. She felt it, then calmed it. "I will not go without telling him I come," she said. "He will not be paraded without knowing for what reason his daughter walks beside a stranger." "You have my word," Maya said. He looked down the hill again. Lobo will not drag him through the square. He prefers to look civilized. He will escort. That buys us the time to turn escort into witness. They left the chapel. The door closed with a sound like a blessing. The olive grove received them with its grey-green hush. The path was kind. It sloped without springing traps. Rui kept pace. His breath lived close to his ribs, but he did not wince. Inez walked half a step ahead and listened to the ground. Words reached them in threads. Talk of a man sitting in a chair he did not own. Talk of a ring of faces around a work table. Talk of a daughter whose name meant careful hands and stubborn spine. They came to the courtyard of the miller's cousin. A woman sweeping paused and watched them pass, then shut her gate, not to shut them out, but to keep other eyes from peering through. They crossed the lane where the cobbles always tripped those who did not know them. They kept their heads level. They reached the square, which felt like a stage not yet set. The magistrate stood at his post with a face arranged for calm. He did not shout. He lifted a hand. The gesture turned noise into attention. He looked over the heads in front of him and found Inez in 2 heartbeats. He did not smile. He did not frown. He moved his hand the smallest distance to invite her forward. Rui followed. Maya appeared from a different angle, as if the ground itself had brought him. Lobo stood to the side of the apothecary door, speaking to Tomas in a tone a neighbor might use when praising weather. His companions leaned against the wall as if it were friendly. Tomas sat on a chair from his own shop, back straight, hat in his lap. He scented the air as he did when a mixture might curdle. He saw Inez and looked at her face before anything else. It told him what mattered. He nodded once, fast, an agreement to a plan that had not been laid out for him. He rose and Lobo's hand touched the air as if to suggest remaining. Tomas did not acknowledge the suggestion. He crossed to the magistrate with his daughter coming from the other side, like the echo of his stride. "Senor Magistrate," Tomas said, respectful enough to keep the world neat. "I am ready to answer questions that belong to me. I am not ready to hold words that belong to someone else." He looked at Lobo's fine coat and then at the ground, as if the ground needed reminding that it should not applaud the wrong thing. The magistrate seized on the word belong. He loved it. He loved its sense of boxes and labels. "Let us belong to the record," he said. "We will set down what is known and mark clearly what is conjecture." He gestured toward the office. The door opened as if it had been listening. Inside, the benches lined the walls like people waiting their turn. A table stood at the center with room for ink and dignity. The clerk Maya had promised had already been fetched by Maya's quiet network. He stood with pen in hand, and a face that adored neatness for its own sake. He nodded to the magistrate, to Rui, to Inez, to Tomas, to Lobo, in that order, not because of anything, but because some order always comforts a man who loves to write. Councillor Alvaro Coutinho arrived the way a polished shoe arrives on a carpet. He did not hurry. He did not look so much as he surveyed. His smile did not assume it would be returned, because he had learned to be patient with admiration. He greeted the magistrate with warm phrases that seemed to have been rehearsed in a fine room and then lowered for provincial ears. He praised the village for its cooperation. He regretted the disturbances of the night that had led to misunderstandings. His eyes rested lightly on Tomas, as if to bless a devoted man caught in the net of other people's carelessness. The magistrate made room for all. He loved how tables made room for all. "We will hear in order," he said, satisfied by his own prudence. First Miss Duarte, who found a traveller in distress. Then the traveller, who will identify himself as he sees fit. Then Master Tomas, whose shop has been mentioned. Then any man who has something to add that will not waste ink. No one objected. Ink won often in such rooms. Inez stepped to the table. Her father's breath stood beside her. Rui's calm sat behind her like a chair. She did not clear her throat. She spoke. "Last night I returned from a house at the edge of our village where a child coughed," she said. "I found a man by the ditch, cold and hurt and alone. I carried him to our barn because my shop was closer than a physician and faster than prayer. I stitched what had been opened by confusion. I gave him broth and a bed of linen. He spoke as one accustomed to the care of trained hands. He thanked me. No one interrupted. Even Lobo looked politely interested, because he wished to appear in step with any tune played. She went on, laying facts like tiles in a walkway. Our magistrate called before dawn, seeking persons unknown. I told him I had a cousin. That was not the truth. It was a delay. I do not love delays. I used one to give a man privacy to own his name. A murmur moved through the room and then knelt politely and waited. Later, she said, and now she took the folded paper from her bodice with the same care she had used to put it there. I found a seam misbehaving in the man's coat. It concealed a paper. I looked. I did not wish to. I did. It named goods and approvals and moved them across our land with a smooth hand. It did this in a way that might make my father's shop into a stepping stone for men who take long strides. She placed the paper on the table but left her fingers on it for the breath of a heartbeat longer, as if to say, "Do not hurry. It will go where it must." The clerk leaned in as if drawn by gravity. The magistrate gestured. "Copy it," he said. "Here," before anyone moves their mouth faster than the pen. The clerk began at once, the scratch of the nib a sound like rain in a drought. Coutinho waited as polite men wait, patient and a little amused. When the magistrate's eyes lifted, he spoke. He admired the diligence of a good daughter. He admired the modesty of a craftsman. He admired how, so often, villages produce exactly the sort of people who keep the realm from tipping over under the weight of heavy matters. He cautioned against reading malice where there might be only haste. He told a story about a shipment of wax that had been logged twice by the same clerk because the second cart had arrived at the noon hour and confused the ledger. He smiled. It was a good smile. It interrupted suspicion like a spoon tapping a glass. He continued with grace. The realm needed order, he said. Order was achieved when men in their places allowed processes to do their work. If there had been irregularity, that was troubling. If innocent names had appeared where guilty names should stand, that was grievous. It would be corrected. He looked at Thomas and let kindness pour from his tone. A man so careful as our apothecary could not be the source of any stain. Of course not. That the shop appeared in a sequence of records was only proof of its centrality in the village's good. He paused to let satisfaction collect. Inés watched the faces of the room, not Coutinho's mouth. She knew how people looked when they wanted to be persuaded, and how they looked when they had been. She saw some relax. She felt her spine request her attention, as if to remind her that standing upright sometimes requires a decision. She spoke again, not to contradict but to add a thing that did not fit well with oil. "Counselor," she said, and her voice made the title sound like a borrowed coat. "In the paper there are notes in margins that are not a clerk's. They are a guiding hand's. The hand writes the same phrase in two places. It writes, 'Approve the smaller man because he will not ask questions.' It writes, 'Delay the large order until the inspection is moved to a later date.' These are not phrases of a mistake. They are phrases that build a path for some and a wall for others. My father's shop has no wall to climb. He cannot afford one. He has only his name. It should not be used as brick for anyone else's architecture." Coutinho's smile thinned. He admired cleverness less when it made work for him. He drew himself up the smallest degree. "My child," he said, which was a mistake because the room contained her father and a prince he had not yet noticed. The world of supply and policy contains phrases you might misinterpret. He softened. "You have done a kindness. That is clear. Leave the sorting to those who sort for a living." She did not flush. She made her voice a shade lighter, as if to show she could be gentle while insisting. "Sorting that hides the sorters is not sorting," she said. "I've read enough ledgers to know when a note is meant to be seen and when it is meant to lead the eye away." The magistrate liked this. He liked that his pen's work might matter today. He gestured to the clerk. "Read a passage," he said. "Read it twice." The clerk obeyed. The words hung not in poetry but in sequence. Even a man who preferred rugs and manners could not pretend they were only careless. Rui had said nothing. He had sat, breathing with the room. He watched Coutinho's fingers, not his smile. He watched who nodded when and who looked at the door as if it might help them. He let the moment ripen until it was ready. Then he stood. He did not step onto a chair. He did not pound the table. He stood in a room that doubted it would ever see a prince and then realized it already had. He lifted his hand, and the signet ring caught light. He did not thrust it forward as a threat. He allowed it to be recognized as a tool meant to open the right drawer. "Counselor," he said, and he did not adorn the title. He offered it the plainness it deserved in that breath. You will think me ungrateful for making your morning difficult. You will be wrong. I am grateful that a village and a clerk and a magistrate have given us a different kind of room than you prefer. One where a daughter can be heard before a man with friends in the capital has finished his story. There was a collective intake, quiet and full. Coutinho swallowed the start of a bow and corrected it into a nod. He calculated faster than most men. He discovered in an instant that the person he had hoped would be delayed on some country road was standing 3 paces away. He adjusted. He let his voice grow warm. "Senor," he said, "your presence honors us. I am distressed to see you in discomfort. Had I known—" "You would have brought a carpet and some finer words," Rui said, and there was no malice in it. There was only the refusal to sink into a cushion when a wooden chair was telling the truth. He looked around the room and counted them as his people, not as categories. This morning requires clarity. A paper exists. It shows what haste and habit can do when men believe themselves safe from ordinary eyes. We will let the ink speak. We will let names stand. We will correct what must be corrected. We will do so in public enough a way that small shops do not suffer for large hands. He set the ring on the table, flat, as if leaving a weight to hold down paper that wants to fly away. The magistrate's eyes shone. The room breathed out. Coutinho tried one more path. He spoke of loyalty as if it were a blanket to spread over cold facts. He spoke of the dangers of panic. He looked at the door as if it might offer him a friend. The door did nothing. The clerk read again. The magistrate made notes with a diligence that almost trembled. Tomas kept his hat in his hands as if it were the rudder of a steady boat. Rui turned to Inez then, in a moment that belonged to neither record nor policy. He did not lower his voice. He let the room hear the thing that mattered. "I asked you to carry weight you did not choose," he said. "You carried it with a grace that embarrasses my training. I will not ask you for more. I will offer you the rest." He paused, not for effect, but to be sure that he said what he meant and not what a prince ought to say. "Inés Duarte," he continued, "if you would consent to walk beside me beyond this morning, I would be honored. I ask not to place you in rooms where you must change yourself to be heard. I ask because I know I am better when you stand near enough to remind me of what a steady hand feels like. I will not make you a secret. I will not make you an ornament. I will make you a partner if you will have a man who must often sit at tables and ask for ink to outpace habit." He had not kneeled. He had not raised his voice. He had put a life on the table in a room where men pretended only paper mattered. Tomas's hands froze on his hat. The magistrate looked at the clerk, who looked at the page, who wrote anyway because habit is not always the enemy. Lobo's mouth curved, but whether in admiration or calculation not even he could say. Coutinho's smile went brittle. Beatriz was not there, but a knowing seemed to pass through the village, even where it had no ears. Inés felt the room shift its weight to see what she would do. She felt the old fear she had kept folded small for years lift its head, that a door would close behind her and make her arms useless to people who counted on them. She met her father's gaze. He nodded. He did it with no flourish. He had loved her mother with the same small nod one morning over bread. It had been enough then. It was enough now. She spoke. "Senor," she said to Rui, because form mattered, even when one whispered, "My answer is yes, but it is yes, shaped like the life I have. I will not stand in a room where I cannot smell camphor now and then. I will not learn to ask permission to help a child with a cough. I will not trade my apron for a lace that catches on everything. If you can love a wife with ink on her fingers and tincture on her sleeves, then yes. If you need a lady who does not smell of rosemary, I am ill-suited." Rui's relief was so plain, it made even the clerk look up and smile. It was a relief that said he had hoped for exactly this and had been afraid to name it. "Then I am a fortunate man," he said simply. The magistrate cleared his throat, not to break the spell, but to remind the world it had other work. "We have a declaration and a document," he said. "We must do justice to both. Master Tomas, please step forward." He did. The magistrate lifted a pen. In full view and in neat script he wrote, "The shop of Tomas Duarte is henceforth publicly affirmed as blameless in the matter under inquiry. No man will speak against it without evidence, and such man will answer to this bench." He held the pen up like a bell. He asked Rui to place the ring's imprint beside the script as a sign that the promise was not local gossip. Rui pressed the signet into warm wax while the clerk watched, as if ceremony were a recipe to be followed without a pinch too much salt. The seal took. It made the page look suddenly like a thing that could stand on its own legs. The magistrate held it up for all to see, then handed it to Tomás, who received it as he would a tool he would use every day. He slipped it into his coat with the care given to a new cure. Coutinho's options narrowed like a path above a river. He tried charm one last time. He turned to Lobo and spoke lightly as if he were discussing bread. "We have inconvenienced a good shopkeeper," he said. "Make amends. Ensure his door is thought of kindly. Show that we are men whose memories are long when gratitude is owed." It was a smooth way to retrieve ground without showing the scramble. Lobo agreed at once, bowing shoulder and head as if they shared a joke. "Of course," he said. "The village loves Master Duarte. A man who keeps people well is worth a dozen loud fellows. My men will help right any disorder in his shop. We will carry water as the magistrate directs. He let the words do the work of confession by making help sound like a debt paid. He did not look at the bit of wax in his pocket. He would keep it as a lesson in hubris." The magistrate liked this conclusion. He loved when people who had been untidy agreed to become helpful. He directed that 2 men accompany Lobo to see that carrying water did not turn into carrying tales. He sent a boy ahead to ask the bell to ring at the hour, not because there was ceremony to be had, but because it would soothe those who worried when routine was disturbed. The clerk finished the copy. He sanded it, shook off the extra grit and blew lightly. He made a second. He handed one to the magistrate's drawer for safekeeping, and another to Maya, who accepted it with the air of a man who knows paper does not replace vigilance, but makes vigilance more effective. Maya tucked it into his coat with a small nod to the saint, who had watched their earlier reading. Coutinho, who had not lost so many mornings that he could not afford to lose one more, stood and adjusted his sleeve. He addressed the room with that same elegant calm. "We have seen good process today," he said. "He meant I will not fight a battle I cannot win in front of this many eyes." He looked at Rui. "I will await you in Coimbra with proper accommodations and proper respect. We will, I trust, arrive at conclusions that suit the dignity of all concerned." He bowed the exact amount required for a prince's patience, then took his leave. The room did not mourn him. People began to breathe as if their chests had been bound and were now freed. The magistrate spoke with practical satisfaction. "The morning has been busy," he said. "Let us return to our tasks with a clearer slate than we had when we began." He looked at Inés and Tomás. "If any tongue wags at your door today, send it to me. I will give it a pen to hold until it remembers its manners." Tomás went to his daughter. They did not embrace in a way that asked for attention. He put his hand over hers for a moment, a grip that said, "We stand." He looked at Rui. He took his measure the way a man decides whether a shelf will hold a jar. Then he bowed with his head, a slow one, born of gratitude rather than awe. "Señor," he said, "you have honored us by letting our small roof shelter you when your name could have required a better. If you ask for my daughter, you must accept that she will always count jars before she counts invitations." "I would not ask otherwise," Rui said. He meant it. Tomás believed him not because he had a ring, but because his voice had lost the need to be believed. Beatriz slipped in at the doorway then, breathless and shining with the relief of finding something where one feared there would be a hole. She had a folded piece of cloth and a ribbon to make it seem necessary. She stood on tiptoe to peek around heads, and then found Inés with her eyes like a bird finds seed. "Well," she mouthed. Inés lifted her hand so that Beatriz could see the ring that had sat on the table and now warmed her palm. Beatriz covered her mouth and laughed into it, the kind of quiet laugh that mends tired hearts. Maya took charge of the practical lines that lead out of big moments. He arranged that a carter, unrelated to any of Lobo's friends, would be at the ready afternoon to take the first leg of a journey toward Coimbra. He set 2 men at the apothecary door, not as guards but as ushers, to direct goodwill and to interrupt gossip by asking it to carry parcels. He spoke with the baker's boy and gave him a task so that his whistle would carry cheer instead of rumor. The ring returned to Rui's finger. He did not spin it. He looked at it as if it were not a toy but a tool. He turned to Inés in the middle of the ordinary bustle. He did not whisper in a corner. He spoke where bread and ink and patience meet. "There is much to do," he said. "If you wish to catch your breath, I will wait. If you wish to walk with me to your door, I will be proud." She took his offered arm lightly, not clinging. "Pride is a poor walking stick," she said, "but I will walk. We will see the door unbarred. We will let the day know to behave." They went out together. The square was brighter, as if a cloud had decided to move. The bell marked the hour without drama. The people watched without staring. Lobo had already disappeared down a side street, with two sober citizens acting as his shadow, a small correction that felt like fresh air moving through a close room. The apothecary door stood open. The shop smelled of rosemary and honesty. Tomas stepped in first and set the sealed statement on the counter as if it belonged exactly there, between the mortar and the jar of licorice root. He straightened a ledger that had been disturbed and returned a stool to its place. He tied on his apron as if he were tying the morning to the day that would follow. Beatrice came behind and began to rearrange a display of soaps with the art of someone who knows beauty can persuade people to believe in order. Neighbors trickled in with thin excuses and real congratulations hidden in the purchase of camphor and sugar drops. The magistrate passed along the street, not to intrude but to be seen, so that his face would do some of the work of calming without more words. Maya vanished and reappeared in 3 places in a quarter hour, as men like him do. Rui stood close enough to the counter to ask what arnica cost for a man who insisted on walking before he should, and far enough not to crowd those who needed to buy what they had come for. Sainez served 2 customers and then turned to him with a look that softened without losing focus. "We will go to Coimbra," she said. "We will place what must be placed where it can be seen without being smudged. We will return, and we will not let the road make us strangers to our own door." He lifted her hand briefly and let it go. "Agreed," he said. His smile was not for the room. It was for the person who had called him back to life with a needle and now called him forward with a vow. The day, which had threatened to become a rumor, settled into being a day at last. A cart creaked by. A child laughed because soap bubbles had escaped a basin near the fountain. The mountain mist withdrew to consider its next entrance. The people of the village resumed the art that keeps a place whole. They worked, they greeted, they watched without prying, and they remembered for once to be glad that a small room with jars and a counter can hold so much of what makes a life worth stitching back together. Dawn came like a promise no one dared to say aloud. The mist turned thin and silver. The olive leaves shivered as if they knew a change had arrived. Inez tied her apron in a neat bow and slipped a sprig of rosemary into the knot. She did not dress for spectacle. She dressed to work and to be seen working. Her father watched from the doorway, thumbs in his apron strings, pride tucked under his ribs where it would not make a fool of him. Rui came at the hour he had said, not a minute before or after. He moved like a man who had learned to measure himself. He wore his coat buttoned in a way that left his healing side in peace. The ring sat quiet on his hand. He did not show it, he did not hide it. He stood in the light and let it be what it was. "Are you ready to walk?" he asked, and his voice warmed the edge of the morning. "I was ready last night," she said. The road waited. It may as well wait no longer. Tomas cleared his throat as if to dislodge a crumb of worry. He addressed Rui without ceremony. "My daughter is not good at sitting still when there are errands that mean something," he said. "She will forget to eat. Remind her. If you do not mind being reminded yourself." "I accept the charge," Rui answered. He bowed to Tomas as one tradesman bows to another over a counter. "You have my word that I will not put a plate of promises where bread should be." Beatrice appeared like a sparrow at a window, the ribbon in her hair bright with mischief and goodwill. "You will take this," she said to Inez, pressing a small roll of muslin into her hand. "If anyone tries to tangle your words, untie them while looking at this. It is straight. It will make your sentences straight, too." Inez kissed her friend's cheek. "Laugh when the bell rings," she said. "Make the morning believe it is ordinary." "I will laugh so well the sun will be jealous," Beatrice said. Then she wiped at her eyes and claimed the damp was only from the steam of a kettle. Maya waited at the corner, a plain cloak over plain clothes. He looked like any man carrying news from one house to another, yet his gaze kept count of shadows and corners with the ease of a scribe counting letters. He took up a place beside Rui and did not say much. That is the best way to protect someone in daylight. They set out. The square watched them go without craning. The magistrate stood where people could see him and nodded once, as if to say, Ink has taken the shape we asked and will hold until we return. A cart creaked. A dog chose not to bark. A child ran 3 steps and stopped because his mother's hand understood the tune of the morning. The road to Coimbra was not grand. It was a collection of stretches where stones remembered rain and dust remembered the feet that made it. They walked and they rode by turns, for the cart Maya had promised met them beyond the line where the fields gave up their claim to the horizon. Rui offered Ines the seat and took the step beside the wheel. She refused once and then took it, because stubbornness breeds blisters. He accepted the step and did not make it into a sacrifice. They crossed a bridge that had seen vows and quarrels, children's games and merchants' tallies. The planks gave softly underfoot, as if to remind them that wood remembers feet and has no opinion about rank. The river below kept its own counsel. Ines paused in the middle of the span. She looked down and then up. The morning light made a path on the water, as if someone had dropped a ribbon of gold and it refused to sink. "Do you keep your courage in your pocket still?" Rui asked, gentle. "I do," she said. "But on bridges I keep it in my throat. It helps with breathing." She touched his sleeve with 2 fingers and did not make more of it. He turned his hand so that his knuckles brushed hers, a quiet pact made without speech. They moved on. They reached Coimbra as noon considered itself. The city met them with the bustle of men who like to be seen walking with purpose. Maya led them to a door that did not advertise itself. A clerk with a clean collar opened it and looked past them at first, the habit of a man trained to see lists before faces. Then he looked again and saw what mattered. His mouth softened. He set a table at once. "We will copy," he said to Maya, without asking who commanded. "We will stamp. We will place names where names cannot wriggle." "Thank you," Maya answered. He did not waste praise. He had chosen the right man. That was praise enough. The room filled with the sound of quills. The ink held steady. Rui did not dominate. He signed where he must, and stood back where he could. He watched men do their work with the respect of one who knows that the realm is kept afloat by those who can read a line without reading into it. Ines stood beside him and read as well, not because she doubted, but because seeing words set in order calmed the body like a cup of broth. When a question rose, she answered it in the shortest phrase that would hold truth. A small audience gathered at the door because curiosity is a citizen in every city. They did not crowd. They knew which mornings could not afford it. A messenger went out and returned with another official. This one had a careful mind and a poor memory for faces. That is a useful combination in some rooms. He read the copy, read it again, and looked at the signatures and the seal as if they were the only ornaments he trusted. He set his stamp beside them, and the sound it made felt like a foot stepping onto dry land. By late afternoon, the paper had become papers, one for the magistrate's drawer, one for the clerk's book, one for the provincial board that keeps the habit of writing minutes that outlive moments, one for Tomas Duarte's counter, one that would find its way quietly and efficiently into the hand of a person whose quiet authority made Councillor Coutinho's reach suddenly shorter. No one argued loudly. No one needed to. A decision made in good ink avoids the need for raised voices. Their work done, Rui turned to Ines. The day had gathered a fatigue that did not ask permission. He did not ask whether she was tired. He asked if she would like a cup of tea before they returned. She agreed. They sat at a small table by a window that looked onto a courtyard, where Ivy had learned to be dignified. The tea came with a slice of bread that had nothing to prove. "You said you would not trade your apron for lace," he began. "I will not ask you to. But there will be places where eyes will turn when your name is spoken with mine. Are you ready to ignore some of them and teach others to behave?" She smiled at the bread as if it were a lesson. "I have ignored eyes before," she said. "Usually they belong to people who cannot stand the smell of camphor. We will give them rosemary instead. It softens stubborn noses." He laughed, and the laugh did him more good than the tea. He reached across the table and laid his hand over hers. He did not mind who saw. He did not mind if anyone added a line to a list he could not control. He had asked her to be his partner in front of men who loved ink. He would not now hide her in a corner. On the road back they spoke less. Words had done their day's labor. The sky lowered itself into a color that promised warmth behind shutters. The wheels found ruts and left them. The cart horse flicked its ears. Maya walked ahead with the stride of a man taking responsibility for the stretch between two safe places. At the edge of the village, dusk lit lamps like small suns cupped in glass. Beatrice's laugh spilled into the lane before her steps appeared. She carried a basket of ribbons and needles and something wrapped in cotton that could only be the dress she had badgered into shape, in an afternoon that should not have been asked to do so much. "Do not argue," she told Inez, thrusting the bundle into her hands. "You will wear it. It is not lace, it is honesty sewn from a bolt I hid because I hoped. Do not tell the others. They will expect me to be generous again, and I have a reputation to maintain." Inez hugged her hard. The bundle smelled faintly of soap and sun, even though neither had been in great supply. Beatrice pulled Tomas by the sleeve. "Come, father of the bride," she said, happy with the sound of the words. "Do not look at me that way. The magistrate is primed, the bell is one's breath from ringing, and the priest has found his book. If we wait, I shall be too excited to stand, and then I will blame the two of you in front of the whole village." Rohi stood very still and watched delight run through the square like a breeze that carries the promise of rain in summer. He looked at Inez as if asking whether this felt right. She nodded with a certainty that surprised her. It wasn't haste. It was simply not wasting any more courage than one must. She slipped into the shop with Beatrice and re-emerged moments later, transformed only by clarity. The dress hung straight and clean. It let her breathe. It let her lift her arms. Her hair had been smoothed and twisted with a ribbon that did not apologize for being blue. The sprig of rosemary had been tucked at her shoulder as if it had earned a place at the ceremony. The square filled in that modest way small places have, where presence itself is a gift and spectacle is considered impolite. The magistrate stood with his ledger, not because he would write their vows, but because some part of him believed that all important things should be accompanied by a pen. The priest came from the chapel with a book and a smile that had mended many quarrels. Maya stationed himself where he could watch, without intruding. Even Lobo, under watchful escort, had found a place at the edge of the crowd, hands folded, mouth subdued into something like respect. He did not dare spoil a scene that would remember him unkindly. He would learn to choose better mornings for his talents. Tomas took his place beside Inez and put her hand into Rui's, as one places a good tool into a pair of worthy hands. He did not make a speech. He cleared his throat and said what needed saying. "May your house be one where doors swing easy to the honest and heavy to the sly," he said. "May you never run out of clean cloth. May you always know when to boil water." The priest made the sign that calls attention to the right things. He spoke the words in the order that people find comforting. "Do you?" he asked, and each answered before the other because they had already spoken their promises in the hard part of the day. When the time came for rings, Rui lifted the signet from his hand. For a breath, the square smelled again of sealing wax and orders given far away. Then he held the ring not as power but as pledge. "This began as a key," he said quietly, letting the nearest hear and the farthest read his mouth. "It will end tonight as a circle, if you will." He held it to Inez as if offering a task instead of a treasure. "Make it ours." She did not hesitate. She slid the ring onto a ribbon that Beatrice had conjured from some miraculous pocket. She tied it about her wrist with a strong knot, and then reached for the simple band Tomas had kept in his coat since noon, because a father plans even when he pretends he does not. She placed it on Rui's hand with care. He returned the gesture, and in that exchange something invisible settled into place like a part of a loom finally aligned. The square seemed to feel it. Breath went out like a blessing. The priest closed his book and opened his hands. "I could speak at length," he said, and a ripple of amusement soothed nerves near and far. "I will not. You have spoken with deeds. Let your days speak the rest." He lifted his hand and brought it down softly, the gentlest kind of end and the best kind of beginning. The bell rang then, not in alarm but for joy. It took up the tune of the day and made the corners of the square join in. Children clapped because no one had told them not to. The baker's boy produced small buns that had somehow found their way into his basket in the last hour. The fountain asked to be admired and was. Beatrice cried openly and then laughed at herself and declared she would embroider that very moment if only anyone could teach her to stitch the sound of a bell. Rui took Inez's hands and drew her a little aside, not to hide but to step into a smaller circle within the larger one. He looked at her, as if cataloguing everything he hoped never to forget. The curve of her mouth when she made up her mind, the way her shoulders set as if ready to carry a weight and dance under it at the same time. He lowered his head, and she lifted hers, and they met in a kiss that was both new and inevitable. It was not a show. It was a promise sealed in the language that needs no witness, and yet thrived under the eyes that loved them. Their lips parted and laughter slipped between them, not because anything was funny, but because joy has a habit of making sound when it cannot bear to be still. He rested his forehead against hers for a breath. "Thank you," he said, "for everything I know about you and everything I do not know yet and get to learn." "You will learn that I count jars when anxious," she said, "and that I prefer to walk in the rain without a hood if the air smells right, and that I burn porridge when I read while stirring." "I can live with all that," he answered gravely. "I will fetch the rain and eat the porridge and watch you count jars until I know every label by heart." They turned together and let the square fold around them again. Hands reached out and touched their sleeves and their shoulders and did not pull. The congratulations were simple and clean. "May you never run out of rosemary," one woman said, squeezing Inez's fingers. "May the ink always dry true," said the clerk, who had found his way here because he couldn't bear to miss the sequel to a good document. Even the magistrate forgot to look for his pen for the space of a full minute. As evening buttered the edges of the roofs, lanterns appeared like stars someone had hung at human height. Music found itself in the clapping of hands and the tapping of soles. A violin emerged from a case and remembered how to be bright. Tomas danced with Beatrice once, badly and with dignity. Maya was pulled into a circle by two grandmothers who had known him since he walked under their tables. Lobo stood with his shoulders back and discovered that watching honest joy stung more than any scolding. He left before he learned whether that sting could be medicine. Inez and Rui danced, not the polished steps of a court that likes patterns, but the easy turning that comes of being glad to be in the same breath. He kept an arm near her waist without claiming it. She kept a hand near his shoulder without demanding it. Their eyes did most of the talking. "Thank you," his said. "I am here," hers returned. "Stay," both said, as if the night might try to steal either away. Later, when the music had softened into the rustle of people content to linger, they slipped away to the barn, where the first stitches had been laid. The lamplight made a circle as small and as generous as the one that had held them before. The table was clear now, the cloths folded, the brick replaced with a newer one because habits, once found useful, are hard to give up. "Here," he said, "because words are more honest when there is little to distract them." "Here," she agreed. He looked at the beam where he had counted knots to keep from gritting his teeth. He smiled at it as one smiles at an old teacher. Then he looked at her again. "I will fail sometimes," he said. "I will say a thing too smooth. I will believe a man because I want to be done with listening. Remind me." "I will fail sometimes," she said. "I will make a cure too strong and a tea too weak. I will send you out into a rain that turns the road to paste because I love the smell of it too much. Remind me." "I will," he said, "with courtesy when I can and insistence when I must. And I will remind you with laughter first," she said, "and then with my hand on your sleeve, and then with a word that no one else has to hear." He held out his hand again, the same simple gesture he had offered at a chapel bench. She took it. They stood very close. The lamplight held them with the same old affection. The ring at her wrist warmed to the heat of their joined hands. The village made its soft hum around them. The square sighed like a room that had had good company and would clean itself in the morning. The river kept its opinion to itself. The mountain settled more fully into the dark. The world did not change its shape to suit them. They found a way to fit themselves to it without giving up what mattered. Before they blew out the lamp, Inez took a needle from its dish and threaded it. She tied a knot with confidence and put it by the ring on the table so that the last thing they saw before sleep was the pair of them side by side. A circle and a point. A promise and a tool. The next day would ask for both. They would give both freely and without fuss. In the morning, the shop door would open, and the first customer would be a man with a sore knee and a good story. The second would be a woman buying lavender, because the scent had become a way to say I was there, and I saw and I cheered when the bell rang. The magistrate would stop by to borrow a pinch of something not listed on any official inventory and return it twice over. The clerk would send word that ink holds fast. Maya would vanish into the places that need attention, and turn up with bread and news when least expected. Ines and Rui would argue amiably about whether porridge can burn if attended by two people in love. They would learn each other's ways the way careful people learn a craft, by doing, by watching, by correcting, by forgiving, by laughing, until the mistakes grew small enough to be kept in a jar and admired for how harmless they had become. When the lamp went out, the darkness was not a threat. It was only the other side of light. They had brought their own. They knew how to tend it now. They would guard its wick, pinch it when wind misbehaved, trim it when needed, carry it into rooms where truth sometimes avoids work, and make it set a shoulder to the task. Love had come to them not as an accident, but as a choice made over and over in small gestures, in stitching and in standing still when asked to run, in telling the truth when silence would have been easier, in holding a hand at the right time and letting it go at the right time to take up a jar or a pen. It felt like the first deep breath after a fever breaks. It felt like a door that opens without creak. It felt like lamplight, steady through a night that had lasted long enough. Thank you so much for listening to this story all the way to the end. We hope it moved you as much as it moved us while telling it. We'd love to hear your thoughts. Leave us a comment telling us where you're listening from and what you liked the most. Rate this story from 0 to 10. What score would you give it? If you enjoyed this story, don't forget to subscribe to the channel and leave a like as a show of support. That really motivates us to keep creating and sharing more stories full of emotion and life lessons. And before we go, we want to remind you that an exciting and heartwarming story recommendation will appear on the final screen. If you'd like to enjoy it, just click on the video. Thank you once again for being here, and we'll see you in the next story.